Toni Morrison was a established writer and was critically acclaimed for most of her pieces, including The Bluest Eye, Sula, and other works similar. She was mostly known for her pieces on the lives of African Americans and the struggles that they went through and how she related that to her own life. Now, in the piece that we were given to watch, she talks about how evil is almost a cliche or has the appearance of cliche. So basically, she talks about how when an evil person or a bad thing is presented in literature, it is expressed as very flashy, very showcasey, almost to grab the reader's attention more than anything else. And you can almost parallel that to real life, and you can see that in the news with many things that happen. The bad thing will almost always catch your attention the most. It'll keep you thinking about it rather than maybe a good thing that you saw on the internet one day. And I think that's really important to think about as you listen to this, as she talks about how she gets very bored with this because it seems to be in almost every piece of literature where there seems to be a common enemy. Now, I think in some of Toni Morrison's pieces, you can believe that to be like people who oppress African Americans and who have kept them down. Or maybe you can view it in The Bluest Eye as, self-inflicted like pain or, self-judgment and things like that. So basically, she goes on to say that something that is good is almost mute. Something that is good is quiet and almost not recognized. Something like that is important because, you can draw that back to real life as many things in modern day, good things you see, oh, that's great, and then you move on. It's not really recognized, it's not really put into the public eye as much as bad things. And so she further goes on to say that goodness is really described as something that is dumb or not clever. And you can kind of understand where she's coming from, because if a writer thinks about it, a person, or like say if a person believes that most people are naturally born evil, for instance, that a person who is good is not thinking of their own self-interest and is ultimately going against their own self-good to help others. So if you're thinking about it that way, somebody who goes out of their way to help others without any positive repercussions for them is someone who is not smart, or someone who is not clever, because they are not thinking of themselves and are not helping themselves in the long run. Now, I think that she goes on to talk about how, it's not recognized and things like that. So I would like to take time to bring up a person who, from my experience, is a good person who is not necessarily dumb, just to kind of bring a little difference to what Toni Morrison is talking about. The book To Kill a Mockingbird, for instance, is centered around a court case who is taken care of by the generous Atticus Finch, who he is a good person trying to help someone out with no real gain for himself. I don't know if others could argue that it would increase his standing, but really he's arguing against the town in favor of a black man who, Atticus is just a normal guy. He wears a suit, so it's kind of different, but he's just a normal guy. He wears a suit, and he's the good guy. Now, you could go on to say that he's not really recognized, but I mean, the book isn't necessarily about him. It's mostly about the kids, but you could say that he is the good guy, and he is not stupid. He is a smart man. Now, on the other side of that book, the villains, the family who are trying to frame that person, they generally are not very smart. They are the dumb ones, but they have a way of saying things that have so much power. They have more effect, which goes a lot with what Toni is saying, is just even though that they are dumb, they still have a lot of pull with their words. They still have a lot of effect. Everything that they say hits with a punch, and you can feel it as you read it. And I think that's important in literature, that these characters are compelling, because it keeps your interest held in. Now, for granted that most good characters can be compelling, as they can be the protagonist, but the antagonist is mostly what keeps a person reading. They want to see how this person will fall or if they succeed. I think this is really important because if they don't do this, people might lose interest in the book. Especially if they're young writers or young readers, they could lose interest in the fact that there isn't a lot of action happening if the villain isn't necessarily compelling. Ultimately, I agree with a lot of Toni Morrison's points. I have a little differences because yes, there's a lot of literature out there. This rule isn't going to apply to everything, but I think it's important that you can see this kind of stuff in reality because art mimics reality and literature is a form of art. So I think it's important to recognize that goodness is all around us. It just is not a lot of the times as apparent as the evil. Have a nice day.